Good morning, my magnificent ones. Sue here, your magnificence mentor, and welcome back to Tea with Sue. This is episode number 44. It seems significant somehow. Earlier this week, I was in conversation with friends, and the topic of childhood adversity just bubbled up. And each person was sharing a little bit about what they had gone through as a child that was particularly traumatic. Now, I can bet that there isn't one person out there who hasn't felt or experienced some kind of childhood trauma, some kind of adversity or neglect or abuse at the hands of a variety of people. Could have been parents, could have been teachers, could have been other authority figures, could have been siblings or other relatives, could have been complete strangers. Well, we can, as children, of course, we come in innocent, and sometimes what is done to us is pretty bad and pretty horrific. Well, our minds have difficulty taking that in, and our hearts hurt because of what has happened to us. And in an odd kind of way, as kids, we often think it's our fault, that we have done something or not done something to trigger this whole event that now is bad. And so we carry that piece in us. And along the way, as we grow, of course, we're powerless when we're little for the most part. We don't have the ability to deal with whatever just happened. And so it gets buried and we endure. We get through it somehow. And over the years, we learn to add protective layers to prevent that sort of thing from happening again, or we do what we think we need to do in order to protect ourselves from the big, wide, cruel world out there. At some point in our lives, we begin to recognize that maybe those behaviors that we used as coping strategies, that we used to protect ourselves as best we could, are now getting in our way. So let me give you a little example of that. I learned really young that maybe it wasn't safe to be who I really was, that maybe that old adage of children should be seen and not heard was safer than bubbling out and speaking out and just being who I was. So because it didn't feel safe, I learned to stuff who I was away, stuff myself into this little box and not speak until it was absolutely necessary. And of course, if I did speak, it was always with the eye to, okay, is it safe? Like I didn't even know that I was kind of scanning the room to feel how safe it was to say what I was going to say. And I would agonize about the words that were about to come out. So some of those old lessons I got, if you can't say something nice, don't say anything at all. And while that might be a good adage to have most of the time, there are times when it's important to say something that might not be that nice and might put you in a different light than what you would like to be seen as. So anyway, when I got older, how this impacted me negatively because I was so careful about what I said. But I wanted to speak for a living. I wanted to share. I wanted to teach. Well, if you're afraid to talk, that's kind of hard. And so then I needed to create another layer of protection for myself so that I could protect myself from the fear that I had of speaking out. And so it was just layer of protection upon layer of protection upon layer of protection, covering up who I really was. And who I felt I was very, very, very small. When I came to the understanding and the knowing of how magnificent we are in essence when we come here, I'm going, whoa, I've been playing it so small. And it's not serving me. It's also not serving anyone else who could benefit from what I've learned, because I'm not speaking out. I'm not speaking my truth in the way that I feel is big enough. And so I find it quite fascinating how we can allow ourselves to be victimized long after the trauma or the drama or the adversity or the abuse has stopped. Because we carry the story. We carry that story and we think it's us. Well, it isn't us. It's what happened to us, perhaps, but it isn't us. We are more than that. We are bigger than that. And at some point, as an adult, when you have the power and I have the power to deal with that story, then what I've discovered for me, and I hope you'll discover for you, is that there comes a time when we need to let go of that story, when we need to not identify with it anymore as if it was really us. It's not us. It happened to us. It could have been really terrible at the time, but it's not happening now in this minute. But how often, because we allow ourselves to hang on to that story as part of our identity, do we then let it color our interactions with other people? And then they'll trigger something in us that takes us right back to that old story. And we feel all those feelings all over again. Maybe we feel powerless. Maybe we feel less than. Maybe we feel put down or totally victimized. And then in today, we bring that right in front of us, right here, right now. And then we're upset all over again and put back in that place that was dark and dreadful, and we didn't really want to go there, but unconsciously we did because it got triggered. So I know I've talked a little bit about triggers before. Well, do you stay mad at the person who just triggered that? Oh no, bless them for saying, whoa, that trigger is still active. That button got pushed. I flared up with all of those old bad feelings. And of course, all we want to do is get away from it. Well, that strategy works temporarily, but at some point, it will raise its ugly head for you to deal with. So you say, well, how do I deal with that? Well, there's a variety of strategies, and we have more help today than we ever had before. So it's going to be up to you to decide. And I guess I've probably tried used most of the strategies that I've come across that are out there. I've gone to counselors, and I can remember one particular a series of sessions with a psychologist, and I called them crying lessons. I went and said, look, I've thought my issues to death. I know what all my issues are, and I've talked about them ad nauseum, and I'm sick of that. But I don't think I know how to feel. I just want to know how to feel. Can you teach me how to feel? And he did. It was amazing. And all he was doing was sitting there holding space for me and allowed me to feel my feelings. Well, of course, I called them crying lessons because there were buckets and buckets and buckets of tears that I shed as I literally shed those old layers of hurt and anger, fear, grief, all of those things that had piled up. So it was like a barn full of manure, and it didn't smell very good. And I thought, it's time to get rid of this, shit. It's time to get rid of it. And I felt lighter when I was done. Now, not everybody is in the position to be able to get that kind of help professionally. But even if you're not, there's so much you can do yourself. Now, one of the interesting strategies that I experienced was to replay the story with a different ending. So I tried this with this issue that I'd had very small, where I was very traumatized. And I thought about how I would have preferred the movie in my head to go. What ending would I have preferred than the ending that I actually experienced? So it's like an alternate reality or an optional ending or whatever. And the goal was to lock that into my mind and play that new scenario over and over and over and over again. And now I fought with myself internally because I'm thinking, well, that's not really the way it happened. But the thing is, it's done. It's over with. It happened now at this point, over 60 years ago. And why do I need to keep thinking about the ending of that story when it's done? The book is closed, the chapter is gone, and I learned whatever lessons I needed to learn out of that. I grew because of it. So it's over. What if I create a different ending, the ending that to me would have been ideal, the ending that would have given me a sense of relief and lifted me up and helped me feel better? So that's what I did. I created this new scenario. And then every time I thought about that particular incident, I'd play the new ending, and I'd play the new ending, and I'd play the new ending over and over and over until pretty soon, all I remembered was the new ending. I didn't remember what had gone before. And then, of course, I rarely thought about that scenario at all. So it was a real comfort to me to be able to do that. So it's about lifting up that burden and then letting it go. So there's no point if you need to clean out the barn just to move the manure from one side of the barn to the other side of the barn, which I think is what we often do. We just say, well, this is too much stuff over here, so I'll just move it over here. But you still have all the stuff. So what's the point? So at some point it's, give it away, throw it away, do something to get it out of your mind, out of your heart, which of course brings up probably the most powerful strategy that there is. You might be able to guess, and you'd be right, that it's forgiveness. So there's an immediate reaction sometimes when we think about forgiveness say, yeah, everybody tells me it's important to forgive, but how can I forgive that horrific thing? How can I forgive that person for doing that to me? Blah, blah, blah. And on it goes. And it's a valid question. There's no question about that. It does run through our minds and say, well, what would be the point? Like, I don't condone what they did. It was awful. It was terrible. It was wrong. And so here's an example of that wrestle. So I grew up in the era of spare the rod, spoil the child. And so my grandma had a willow switch for her kids. And she believed that the way to turn children from little savages into solid citizens was to beat any mischief or bad things out of them. So it was, don't hit your brother, and then out would come the willow switch and you'd get hit. And you go, whoa, how do I reconcile these two entirely different things here? Don't hit your brother, so I'm going to beat you until you don't hit your brother. What? So how do I forgive that? How in the world do I reconcile that within me? Well, the forgiveness is not about them, because what happened, and it's over. It's done now. So now, if you're keen and you have a great desire to let that go, the forgiveness is about you now. It's about forgiving them for not knowing how to do it better. Forgive them for their human frailties, their human fallibilities, something like that. Forgive them for their anger, their rage, their own terrors. Maybe that's the way they were brought up, and so they didn't know any different. So, but in that forgiveness, part of that is in forgiving ourselves for allowing it to continue in our heads, saying, that's not serving me. I forgive myself for still playing that old story. I forgive myself for holding on to those resentments, for still resisting feeling any kind of love for myself and compassion for the human condition, because that's what's lacking, is compassion for what has happened. Again, it doesn't mean that we condone it, that we think it's right. We probably think it's really wrong, but you cannot get to peace through war. And if we're at war with ourselves all the time about all these things that have long been over, then it's very hard to find peace. It's very hard to move forward. So this week, I want to encourage you to, for your own magnificent self, if there are burdens that you've been carrying from out of the past, whether the recent past or the long, long ago past, take some time to address that. Take some time to say, how can I begin to shed some light on this, open up to the idea of forgiveness, and take those people or those situations off the hook and say, no, I'm not going to pigeonhole them that way. I'm going to let them out. I'm going to free that piece so that it no longer affects me. So how can you do that? How can you begin to forgive you for keeping yourself kind of wrapped up and bound in that place that's no longer serving you, that you're bigger than that? That is not you. You are more than that. You know you can do this because you're that magnificent. You owe this to yourself to grow in a way that shines the light on how amazing you are, on how compassionate, loving, and giving you are, despite whatever happened in your past. Do have a glorious weekend, my friends. And if you like Tea with Sue, feel free to subscribe to my channel. You can always go to the app, my app, The Magnificence Mentor, become a member. There's lots more content there to inspire you, get you thinking, move you forward into your own magnificence. In the meantime, enjoy, and we'll see you next week.